The Red Pine Saloon had never been so loud. Glasses slammed against rough wooden tables. Poker players argued over cards. Boots scraped across the dusty floor, and laughter echoed beneath the old timber ceiling. Yet the noise vanished in an instant when the front doors burst open. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Ethan Cole, the most feared cowboy for 100 miles. His dark coat was covered in trail dust, his beard was untrimmed, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the room with a look that made even hardened outlaws lower their gaze. Rumors followed Ethan wherever he rode. Some claimed he had survived impossible gunfights. Others whispered he had buried every man who had ever betrayed him. But tonight, something about him was different. He looked tired not from riding, but from carrying a burden no one could see. Without greeting anyone, he walked straight to the center of the saloon. The room fell silent except for the creak of the floorboards beneath his boots. He removed his hat, looked around at the crowd, and spoke in a voice so calm that it somehow sounded louder than a shout. "I need a wife before sunrise." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the entire saloon exploded with laughter. Men slapped tables, women exchanged amused glances, and the bartender nearly dropped a bottle of whiskey. "The great Ethan Cole," someone shouted, begging for a bride. Another cowboy laughed so hard he spilled his drink. Maybe the mighty gunslinger finally lost his mind. Ethan never reacted. He simply stood there, his expression as solid as stone. The laughter slowly faded as everyone realized he wasn't joking. An uneasy silence settled over the room. Finally, old Sheriff Dawson stepped forward. "You expect some woman to marry you without knowing why." Ethan looked at the sheriff for a long moment before answering. "I don't have time to explain." His words only deepened the mystery. The townspeople exchanged nervous looks. Why would the richest ranch owner in the territory suddenly need a wife before sunrise? Some guessed he had inherited land with strange conditions. Others believed he was fleeing enemies. A few whispered about curses and family secrets. None of them knew the truth. Miles away, on the highest hill overlooking the valley, Ethan's grandfather lay dying. Before losing consciousness, the old man had revealed a secret hidden for decades. The Cole Ranch, stretching across thousands of acres, would legally pass to the government at sunrise unless Ethan fulfilled the final condition of his late father's will. He had to be married before the first rays of morning touched the land. His father had believed that only a man with a family could protect the ranch from greedy businessmen, eager to destroy it. Ethan had spent years ignoring marriage, believing his life was too dangerous for any woman. Now, with only one night left, he faced losing everything generations of his family had built. Back in the saloon, no woman stepped forward. Some admired Ethan's courage but feared the danger that followed him. Others simply couldn't believe his strange request. Minutes dragged by. The lantern flames flickered as if even the wind was holding its breath. Then the saloon doors opened again. A young woman walked inside wearing a simple, cream-colored prairie dress covered by a worn brown shawl. Her boots were dusty from traveling, and a small leather satchel hung over her shoulder. She wasn't dressed like the wealthy ladies from the eastern cities, yet there was something quietly elegant about her. Her name was Clara Bennett, though no one in town knew it yet. She had arrived only that afternoon, after months of traveling west in search of work. She paused as she noticed everyone staring toward Ethan, curious. She quietly asked the bartender what had happened. The old bartender leaned close and whispered, "That man needs a wife before sunrise." Clara blinked once, surprised, but instead of laughing like everyone else, she looked directly at Ethan. There was no fear in her eyes, only calm curiosity. Ethan noticed her gaze immediately. For the first time that evening, his hardened expression softened ever so slightly. Clara slowly walked through the crowd until she stood only a few feet away from him. Every person in the saloon watched in complete silence. Even the piano player stopped moving his fingers. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Ethan expected another joke or another rejection. Instead, Clara looked into his eyes and quietly said, "If what you're asking is real, then tell me one thing." Ethan nodded. "Ask." Clara took a slow breath, her voice clear enough for every person in the room to hear. "If I become your wife tonight, will you protect me with the same courage you're asking me to trust you with?" The question struck the room like thunder. Every laugh disappeared. Every whisper ended. Even the toughest cowboys lowered their heads. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole had no immediate answer. The entire saloon waited in complete silence as the rising moon shone through the dusty windows, and everyone realized this night was about to change both of their lives forever. The silence inside the Red Pine Saloon felt heavier than any gunfight Ethan Cole had ever survived. Clara's question lingered in the air, refusing to disappear. Every eye remained fixed on Ethan, waiting to see whether the feared cowboy could answer something no revolver ever could. For years, men had known Ethan as someone who faced danger without hesitation. Yet a single honest question from a stranger had stopped him cold. Finally, he lifted his eyes to meet Clara's. His voice was quiet but unwavering. "No promise I make can erase the dangers that follow me. But if you become my wife tonight, I will stand between you and every bullet, every storm, and every enemy until my last breath." The words carried no boast, only truth. Clara studied his face carefully. She had spent enough years reading people to recognize the difference between charming lies and painful honesty. Around them, the crowd remained speechless. Sheriff Dawson stepped closer. "Miss, you don't have to do this. You barely know the man." Clara nodded politely before answering. "You're right, Sheriff. I don't know him, but I know what fear looks like, and I don't see fear in him. I see responsibility." Those words changed everything. Ethan wasn't asking for love. He wasn't offering fairy tales or wealth. He was asking for trust, and Clara understood the weight of that better than anyone. She had lost her parents to sickness years earlier, worked from town to town to survive, and learned that character was revealed when people had nothing left to gain. Looking back at Ethan, she slowly placed her hand in his. "Then I'll marry you." A wave of astonishment swept across the saloon. Some women gasped. Cowboys exchanged bewildered looks. Even the bartender crossed himself in disbelief. Within minutes, Sheriff Dawson fetched the town preacher from the small church nearby. Lanterns were lit across the saloon, turning the rough wooden room into an unexpected wedding hall. Just before dawn, beneath the warm glow of oil lamps, Ethan Cole and Clara Bennett stood side by side as husband and wife. There were no flowers, no grand celebration, only a handful of witnesses and a promise spoken from the heart. As the preacher declared them married, the first pale light of morning began to touch the eastern sky. Ethan looked, relieved for only a brief moment, before the sound of galloping horses shattered the peace. Riders stormed into town, their leader wearing an expensive black coat instead of a cowboy's dusty jacket. It was Victor Harrow, a ruthless land investor who had spent years trying to seize the Cole ranch. He dismounted with a confident smile. "Looks like I'm just in time to collect what's mine." Ethan calmly stepped outside, Clara walking beside him. Victor unfolded legal papers. "The ranch belongs to me now. Your deadline has passed." Sheriff Dawson carefully checked the documents before shaking his head. "You're too late." Ethan married before sunrise. The will has been fulfilled. Victor's confident smile disappeared. His face twisted with anger as he realized years of planning had collapsed in a single night. Furious, he ordered his men to move forward, but dozens of townspeople stepped between them and Ethan. Cowboys, who had laughed only hours earlier now, stood shoulder to shoulder beside the newlyweds. The bartender carried a shotgun. The blacksmith gripped his heavy hammer. Even elderly ranchers refused to move aside. Clara quietly stepped forward and looked directly at Victor. "A town that stands together can't be bought." Her calm voice carried more strength than shouting ever could. Victor glanced at the determined faces surrounding him and understood he had already lost. Without another word, he climbed back onto his horse and rode away, with his men disappearing into the morning dust. As sunlight spread across the valley, Ethan turned toward Clara. "You saved more than my ranch," he said softly. "You reminded me that courage isn't only found in a gunfight." Clara smiled. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is trust someone they've never met. The crowd erupted into cheers, hats flew into the air, and the Red Pine Saloon echoed with celebration instead of laughter. What had begun as the strangest request anyone had ever heard became the story people would tell for generations. The night one question silenced an entire saloon and changed Two Lonely Lives forever. Years later, travelers passing through the town would still hear the tale of the cowboy, Who needed a wife before sunrise, and the fearless woman, whose wisdom saved not only a ranch but an entire community. Their marriage, born from necessity, grew into a partnership built on respect, loyalty, and love that outlasted every hardship the frontier could offer. If you enjoyed this emotional Old West adventure, subscribe to Midnight Tailies and turn on notifications for more unforgettable Western stories filled with courage, mystery, heartfelt moments, and unexpected twists. Your support helps keep these timeless frontier tailies alive.